Welcome back to the Modern Music Solutions YouTube channel. I'm Jeremiah, and today I want to go over clipping drums with NovaClip. Now, I do a good bit of mastering work, and I hear a lot of mixers. They have this huge transient right on their drums, especially the snare drum, and they mistake a huge transient spike for power in their drums. It doesn't have to be like that, because when you have that huge transient spike, you really can't get your mix as loud or your drums as loud, and that's where clippers can come in. So let's hop into the DAW, and I'm going to show you how to use NovaClip on your drums. So I have the session for the quad tracking video I did. If you want to see how to use Clairvoyant and all that, you could go back and look at that video. But this is going to focus on just the drums and using NovaClip. So for this, I turned off my final limiters, so you're just hearing the plain mix, and here's how it sounds with no clipping on the drums. All right, so you can hear there, and you can even see, like, when sometimes a snare hits, I like blink because it's like really sharp, and they're just super transient heavy. And this isn't through a master limiting chain yet, but I know with them being like this, I'm gonna not be able to get it as loud as I want to because of the drums being so attacky in the fronts. So I'm gonna go through NovaClip, and you'll hear how it just eases off those harsh, crazy transients so I can get everything a little bit louder without sacrificing power. So first you want to ask yourself why you want to clip your drums. For me, I find I could get more power out of my drums when I get a really sharp attack on them and then I tame that afterwards. Because if I just have a clipper on there and there's no like harsh compression, then it kind of just flattens out the drum. I'm not getting really anything out of it. So having a really sharp attacky drum and then clip off just to tame it is how I achieve the very forward sound that sounds really massive. So let's just solo the kick drum here. So kick drum isn't that attacky, but we're gonna just tame it a little bit. So we're actually gonna just start over from NovaClip. I always start with the shape at 1. This is like what kind of clipping it is. So you have hard clipping all the way at 0, and then you have softer, which kind of shaves off a bit more transient. I always just throw it right at 1 or 0.10. Then I always turn on auto gain. So as I up the clipping, it turns down so I get like a level match volume, and then I could adjust afterwards with the ceiling knob. Let's just see how this sounds. All right, so you see right there in this little analyzer that I'm getting some clipping starting here. I'm not really hearing it that much, so I'll push it to where it's too much and then back it off. All right, so right there, I'm hearing it starting to distort in the low end, so that's a little bit too far, so let's just move that back. And let's compare. So that might sound a little bit subtle in solo, but in the whole mix, just shaving off those extra peaks, I can overall get my mix louder by shaving off that little bit extra. And I really don't feel like I'm losing a ton of impact or punch out of the drum. With that said, let's move on to snare. Snare is always the big one that I'm always trying to shave off some transient. I'm always going to start putting the shape at 1, and let's take a listen how this sounds in solo. All right, so same kind of thing. I'm gonna go too far and then just bring it back. So around there is where I'm starting to get just the edge of where it's starting to distort. I might pull this back a little bit later on when I'm hearing the whole mix, but for now, that sounds good. So let's go to our tom bus. And there's actually only one part that has toms in this section, so I'm just gonna get that looped. Throw the shape at 1, or roughly 1. Auto gain on. Let's take a listen. cool. Those sound pretty good to me. I now want to take a listen to how this mix sounds with no clipping before and then what we just added afterwards. So here is our mix with the clipping that we just added. And here's a mix with no clipping. So for me, the big difference is on snare, and I could probably clip it a little bit more, but you can hear what clipping does is it just brings that transient down and it brings more body to the snare. So I hear more of like the note and the fundamental of it, and it doesn't make me blink by how like attacky and transient heavy it is, but I don't feel like I lose power in the snare at all. I'm gonna actually do a little bit more, I think. Just a tiny bit more there. Then that's still with no master bus final limiting on there. So let's hear how loud we can get it with it now being clipped. So I'm actually going to use NovaClip for my first stage of master bus limiting or clipping rather. That's probably where I would end my first stage of my final clipping and limiting. I just want to catch those snare peaks and some extra little drum hits. And then I will have my final bit of loudness come from a limiter, which is Pro L2. And let's see where we can get. So this mix is kind of like a modern metalcore kind of song. So like -6 to -5 LUFS is where those songs usually end up at. I'm right about like -6 to -5.5, and I'm okay with the little bit of distortion I'm getting. Just to check, I want to hear what this master bus sounds like with no clipping on the drums and see how you can hear the drums just feel a lot more distorted from that. So here is the drums with no NovaClip. So with no NovaClip, to me, the toms, they kind of distort the master quite a bit. The snare doesn't really distort the master, but it just sounds so snappy and pokey. So I really get a lot more body out of it. Kick's kind of negligible, to be honest. It just kind of shaves off a little bit extra. But with it on, here's how the mix sounds. Yeah, the snare has a lot more body, a lot more note to it. It sounds great like that. I hope you guys learned some stuff about clipping and how it affects drums and overall mastering. And hopefully you can use this in your next mix. Happy mixing.